Hey! What are you guys doing? It looks like we are recording. I'm going to double check here in a few minutes. We'll be joined today by my mindfulness coach, Brett Engle. He's also a social worker. He's a clinical therapist, but we function at a slightly different level. Yeah, it should be an interesting session. We've done a few back and forths. We meet pretty much every week, and there's been a lot of developments or unfolding of interesting aspects with my case. So we're going to update you today, give you some insights into what's been going on with me this year. I've already done a session with Brett and posted it on RidicuRyder a month and a half ago, I guess. So this will be a second update. I'm just gonna drop this air conditioner down to make sure I get good audio. I think that's probably a little better. So, yeah, I'm just waiting on Brett. He is expected, I'm gonna say sometime next 2 or 3, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. What I want to talk to you guys about before he comes on is things have been really like upside down for me in a couple of areas, and I'll get into that with the discussion with Brett. Last week, I actually did a session with him where a lot of this stuff just tumbled out. And I wasn't expecting, we had kind of agreed to talk about a different topic. And then all of a sudden, this other stuff just kind of like rolled out of me. So when I'm sticky like this, right? When I don't have a real flow going, you're talking to writer. You're talking to a mixture of Mark, patience, and writer. As things progress and as things open up, there's more self energy, or my indivisible opens a little more. If you guys knew me a couple of years ago and said, oh, you know, one day you'll be getting on YouTube and giving these 30, 40-minute talks, I would have looked at you and said, you're at the lunch. There's no way that this is going to happen. But what I've been finding is this sort of drive, this internal idea to open up about this stuff and to explore consciousness in different ways. This is primarily what the book is about, and I'll tell you, without getting into too much of it, there's been major hesitation on bringing the book out. And the reason is, it's twofold. I've been telling people, and this is true, I don't know how to talk about it. Like, there's certain aspects of it that I'm still fuzzy on. I still look at it and I go, okay, wow, that's pretty out there. I don't know how to track with that as writer. Patience, I think, is geared to it. I think our other host, Ridicu, I'll get into this a little more with Brett, but when everything kind of spilled out of me last week, I hit the record button on the Zoom call that I was on with Brett, and I thought it was starting to record. So I was like, great, we're going to capture this. Later, at the end of the session, I went to look and see how it was, I don't know, whatever it does after Zoom, it kind of like coalesces or downloads the file, completes the recording. It wasn't happening. And I was like, oh shit, I wonder what went on. So then I checked back with Brett later to say, hey, did you see the record button on your video, like on your side of the computer? And he was like, no, I didn't see it. So I was like, shit. So I think what happened was I maybe hit the record button, but it didn't, like I, clicked on it, but it didn't hit. So I thought I was recording the whole session last week, rambled a bunch of stuff off that was just like, flow of consciousness, where I need to be with this stuff as writer. I'm finding more and more writers' purpose is to relate what's happening inside the system. The system itself is quite dynamic and pretty aware. Writer as the individual is what we call in the book a scout. So that's someone who goes between individuals and the indivisible, all of this, that which is whole. So writers' ability to go back and forth and bring the information down to a manageable level. Mark comes out and says his spiel in a very sort of simple, non-academic, sophisticated language kind of way. And yeah, so writer is more or less a translator. And I'm not clear, it's not, I'm fine with this, by the way. Like I know that there's a reason for it, and I'm not sure about what. I think the reason is basically I'm supposed to be a regular guy with regular awareness. And here comes Brett. But yeah, the picture for me is, here's a regular guy opening himself with all of this internal built-in, like we all have, awareness. So I'm sharing that in kind of real time. Generally, if I get an idea from here, you guys are hearing about it within a month or two. I'm not, way ahead of the curve as writer as to what's going on. I'm getting the information and then I'm bringing it out to you guys. So, hey, Brett.
Howdy, howdy.
Hey, how you doing, buddy?
All right, how's it going?
Good, good, good.
All right, all right.
You see your recording icon there?
I do.
Good, okay, we're fixed with the recording.
Yeah.
I was just taking a few minutes before you came on to explain to everybody that, we had a session last week. I hit the record button thinking we were capturing it, and it just kind of didn't happen. So, which was kind of a blessing because I was just blah, 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 blah. It wasn't very well structured. I don't know how well you followed it, but you and I have talked about this since a couple of times in texts and yesterday on a phone call.
Yep.
Let's see if we can capture that information again,
Right.
a little bit better structure. And I know you've thought through things. You've prepared some questions.
Yeah.
You had a really, really huge impact on me towards the end of our last session when you brought up. And I'll let you maybe talk about that. Maybe just take it away for a few minutes here. You can recap where you think we're at and how we're going to proceed with this session. I know a lot of the information you share about your mom is
Mhm.
tender, and I, you know, we figured out. I mean, I didn't know at the time when you brought it up, but I since talked to you that she's passed away, and
Mm.
she had kind of a rough time through a lot of her life. So go ahead and just recap, open up the session if you like, and you know, maybe start by asking me a couple of questions once you feel you've got everybody up to speed.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, you had asked if I'm okay talking about it. I certainly am, and I think maybe we'll come back around to it. But just real quickly, you had shared something about what was called at the time a manic episode. You've had that diagnosis of bipolar
Right.
for many years, and that was kind of like, oh, okay, that's what's going on until you know, the DID diagnosis made more sense for you it more recently. And so, but one of your experiences that you shared reminded me of my mom and her. She was bipolar and was very much. Not everybody who's bipolar is gets to be truly manic. She would become manic with psychosis. So she would enter into kind of a dream-like state, but would be awake and would be completely delusional and hallucinating and all of that stuff.
Right.
So yeah, so I did experience that several times when I was growing up. And so yeah, so that's kind of how I got going on that, or what reminded me of it was one of your quote unquote manic episodes. And so yeah, I'm not sure how much to go on about that. I could do the same thing. I could sit here, I think both of us have lots to say on these subjects and could talk with very little prompting. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to launch into anything too long here, but that's just a little bit about how my experience with my mom related somewhat to
Right.
the one you were describing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think from our discussion last time, like, we haven't really touched much on your mom since last week's ramble. But I'm fairly certain, from looking at all of the internal family systems work that's out there, the huge success, there's so many cutting edge providers today, like Dr. Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, all these guys that are very top-notch trauma people are telling people, get into parts work. It's going to be where you really find the rubber meets the road, and you can really accomplish some shifts with your style of operation. So for me, when I look at the explosion that's happening in IFS, in internal family systems, that is plurality for people who are not necessarily dissociative. So in other words, where I'm at, whether it's DID or OSDD, somewhere in the middle, I have different parts that would be called parts in IFS that have actually pronounced and formed into separate identities. They've dissociated enough. They've actually had time to become separate people. And that isn't the case for, I would say, the majority of the population. Now, I'm no expert, right? So it's hard, and nobody is. Nobody really understands this stuff. This is all just coming up in the last 10 or 20 years. But I would say most people have parts, but those parts are still kind of like integrated or built into them pretty solidly. They haven't floated out to become these separate entities, these dissociative, alters, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you look at somebody who's integrated and fairly standard with their approach, but they're still having huge problems with things like depression or bipolar or anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and they start doing the IFS work,
Mm-hmm.
I can see from most of like I carry on in several groups, a lot of them related to dissociative disorders, and then I go into the IFS people and I'm looking at them and they're not that disordered. They have, I mean, there are some people, I feel like IFS is on the one end of the continuum, like we talked about 6 or 7 weeks ago, where it's the kindergarten level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're coming into the building blocks of looking at yourself in parts. You're examining your plurality, but not in a really wild, blown apart, open-ended DID picture. And so, if you can say standard IFS integrated people looking at themselves in parts as a kindergarten building blocks exercise. The grade school kids, 2 through 5 or 6 will be the sort of more slightly dissociative or lightly dissociative people who might be borderline with that Jekyll and Hyde thing going on, who might have other types of personality disorders, depersonalization, derealization, generalized anxiety. These kinds of people are more in the sort of leaning into the dissociative world now, but they're not fully dissociative. They're not showing us complete separate alters, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As you get up in the middle school, now you're probably looking at, and I don't know that a lot of discussion has happened around this, but I would say your high-end bipolars, like bipolar ones, your psychotic disorders, your schizophrenics, will show you, altered states, like clearly different presentations of something that's what people stand back and go, wow, that's a big disconnect. So these guys don't present with separate alters necessarily. So I'm looking at those guys and I'm saying they're just about to pop. They have these beings inside them that could probably show us separate alters, but for whatever reason they're not. They're still holding it together in a package that looks fairly standard some amount of time. So 60-70% of the time they're functioning as what we would consider standard consciousness. But then they have these jets where all of a sudden, something else is happening. And then when we get into high school, I consider the high schoolers the OSDD, otherwise specified dissociative disorder people, which I think more or less I am. I'm either an OSDD median system, or I'm a DID system that's kind of like half healed in certain ways. I was raised in a loving family, so there was a lot of kind of like different factors into how I've presented, but whether or not I'm full-blown DID that's kind of like softened out and gotten into that median zone, or whether I'm a true median system, it doesn't even matter. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I sort of was resisting the idea of being DID for quite a while, and then I started to look at it and said to myself, well, why is that so scary? And it's control. As a host, as the person who normally functions with standard consciousness on the outside, or what I call the representative, you want to fit in, right? You're interested in saying, oh, this is me and this is how I manage myself, and I fit in with society. You don't want to be known as, okay, this guy can be over here sometimes, down here. Like it's disconcerting for the host of a dissociative system to really operate. And I'm going to be getting into some talks coming up on how a lot of people feel like there's a lot of pressure being put on some dissociatives, like there's a lot of them that are out there YouTubing, and they're getting hit with a lot of like, oh, you're faking it. And, it's a back and forth that I'm not going to get into for the purposes of our discussion here today.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Yeah.
So the high schoolers, the more manageable, so they have less amnesia. Typically they have smaller systems, and my system size, if I really let myself float into the DID range more, I could expand my system. I can see that that's possible, but I'm actually consciously looking at it and saying, I want it to become more cohesive. I want to be more midline, more functional, not necessarily integrated. And we may or may not touch on what integration looks like for me in relation to other people who, did integrate in that 9, 10, 11-year-old range as they grew and they became kind of one person. I just, it just never happened for me. And it's, obviously for people out here on the continuum, that never happened during their childhood either. So they've stayed fragmented, and those fragments have become more and more robust with different sort of ideas on things. So then the DID people out here, they're the guys that are like really amnesiac. They don't have recollection sometimes for a day or two of what's going on, because the host is kind of parked in the back seat, and a couple of other alters are running the show for a few days. So these guys might walk out to their driveway one morning and they see a brand new car and they're like, what happened to my Malibu, right?
Gotcha.
Like, we're driving this Lexus now.
This is what we do now.
And they're like, holy shit, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not, I know I'm not at that level necessarily.
Right. Okay.
Like I have more co-consciousness and I have less amnesia, but I do have some patches of amnesia where I'm Ryder's out of it. He doesn't.
Okay.
He gets parked in the back seat, and other people are driving. Other people are co-piloting the car.
Right.
So I use this car analogy. It's out there. It's been around for years. Some dissociatives don't like it. It seems simplistic, and I just figure, most people relate to it. I use a lot of standard language. I talk about alters. I talk about parts, because these are standard terms across the continuum.
Right.
When you get into the finer points of DID and the really sort of high-end systems that are, totally unique until themselves, a lot of them have their own language. The terminology that I might use as a median system means something totally different to someone with full-blown DID who's looking at things in a more layered fashion. So I'm not trying to make myself out to be an expert on this stuff. The one thing that I am doing is I'm exploring this. I've got this Facebook group called Consciousness, alongside Consciousness Explorations, where I'm looking at my multiplicity against or in contrast to things like non-duality, like the IFF self. And these discussions are intersecting these concepts to say, okay, what does this mean? It's the 21st century, and what we've been doing over here as integrated people, more or less fighting all the time, is taking us into this big downward spiral. And everybody can see that. I mean, I'm not, but part of me is looking at what's happening for me and how I've written this book, how Patience wrote this book starting about 8 years ago, about a heightened consciousness, a level of becoming interactive or balanced with your indivisible, with your higher seat of consciousness, whether you want to call that the soul, the Atman, the Buddha nature. In IFS, in internal family systems, they call it the self with a capital S. And the goal of that therapy is basically that you learn to become more and more self-led. So when I say people in the DID range are operating with a very wide concept, very open and very layered awareness, I consider that a higher form of consciousness. People are going to be resistant to that idea because they're saying, well, you know, these guys are all blown apart and, you know, they have this, you know, difficulty, and we treat it as a disorder, and it is a disorder when it's disordered.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But you talk to some of these guys who've been at it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they've got it managed. And they are like, you know, amazing multitaskers. They have this sort of like broad understanding of things, super fucking intelligent. You know, like when I meet a couple of these guys from time to time, I'm generally, I would say 90% of the time, I can feel the energy coming off them. It's this just powerful presence, this open, you know, spaciousness that they have, right? And so I put these guys at the college level. At the university level, if we go off my screen here a little bit, you've got guys like Eckhart Tolle, you know, whoever else you want to talk about in the non-duality world. And I also consider babies to be out there. And my presence or my association with my babies has taught me, like, there's a big black and white difference between Spider, who's the 2-month-old who primarily holds the most trauma and has that abandonment, you know, left in the hospital, was supposed to be adopted, but had this huge head, you know, stayed in the hospital for a couple months with hydrocephalus, was dealing with all these abandonment issues. And then Lulu, who I think around 4 months figured out that she could be a little bit more interactive and bubbly and engaging and get illicit responses from people. So I think in the first couple of months, it was Spider, mainly, you know, large head, diagnosed eventually with arrested hydrocephalus. Like, I take an extra large motorcycle helmet. So what I've seen is Spider holds the abandonment, holds the trauma. Lulu at 4 months, when we finally went into medical foster care, learned to engage and be a little bubbly with people and have those sparkly eyes and all of that stuff going on. She's the sort of you know, good cop baby.
Okay.
Who's the bad cop baby? And I don't want to say that in a real, you know, negative way, but it's kind of like, you know, he's held the trauma so she could move on and engage in the environment and become interactive. So when I'm talking about babies and Eckhart Tolle and all of these people with like very, very, very broad consciousness, babies don't separate themselves from their environment. They don't consider themselves, you know, there's been lots of scientific study on this. Don't ask me what the sort of particulars are, but they don't have object permanence. They don't have that sense of themselves apart from everything.
Yeah, right.
They look at themselves as a continuum, you know, one big part of themselves.
Right.
So when I look at that broader consciousness, or the broadest, what I call the indivisible, I have some of that in me, and we all have some of that in me. And Patience was writing about this for years, trying to explain it to me. Before you came on, I was talking to the group about how Ryder is basically standard consciousness guy. He's what we call in the book a scout. He can travel back and forth between standard awareness and open awareness, or wider indivisible awareness. So that's the continuum that I'm looking at, and I'm in particular interested with our session today in getting into how Patience, as the protector of the system, these systems do not want you to know about them, right? Their whole project or mandate throughout the years and decades is to stay hidden. So you are put out front as the representative. Hey, you're a good guy. You've got all of this stuff going for you. Pat on the back. Keep doing what you're doing. You know, living your life. It's great. These guys want part of themselves to succeed, so they hold the pain and they kind of manage the disaster in the back shadows, while you step out unencumbered and, you know, manage your life. So the last thing they want to do is make you aware of all the garbage that you're carrying around. They see it as, we can manage this shit. Let's let the sort of more open, available part of ourselves step out into the world and do things without all of this garbage that they're managing. Now, of course, because they're children mainly, right? Because they learn this in childhood to hide things, they don't realize that that's a dysfunctional pattern. And then after a while, it catches up and things start to open up. And so these people that are hiding, when they come out and they look and they go, oh yeah, like I've been holding on to this pattern for so long, but I don't need to do it. I can shift from this. So what I found, we'll get into the enterprise rent-a-car picture here in a few minutes. Bizarre incident. When you're talking about your mom popping regularly with these manic episodes, my sense is she had some very sort of volatile persecutor, very triggerable energy that was hiding, that just popped out every once in a while. Just popped out. You couldn't contain it, right? And I'm using this structure loosely. You can be in agreement with it or disagreement with it. I'm just contrasting what you've told me, the little bit you've told me about your mom and how I've rolled. I've had what I consider maybe 4 or 5 big manic breaks, 2 of which I was hospitalized for. So in the beginning, I was diagnosed in 2001. And then in 2010, 2011 range, I was hospitalized again, even though I was fully medicated, going up on my antipsychotics as things became more and more unmanageable. But I just couldn't contain it. It just eventually shut off. So to say that we I think trended heavily on the depressive side. And that depressive side stuff, if that's mainly your picture in bipolar, if you're depressed most of the time, they'll often call you what's called bipolar 2,
right?
Which is kind of like not presenting with full-blown manic episodes regularly, more getting to the hypomanic stage, getting to the kind of like really flighty stage, but then somehow able to throttle back from that. But then I did start to blow into heavier and heavier manic stages. And as the 2010, 2011 episodes showed me, even fully medicated, even ratcheting up antipsychotics, that channel is available to me. So I relate pretty nicely to people who hear voices. I've done a fair bit of work in groups with people who are schizophrenic. It's difficult to really connect with people who are schizophrenic. There's a few out there that are writing beautifully about it, and it really makes a lot of sense. So what I'm saying is, from the experience, from the lived experience of having my bipolar for 20 years and seeing how it's manifesting and then receding, how it's kind of getting softened out, that's informed me quite a bit. Like I have my background as a nurse. All the years I've been looking at mental health stuff. So when I say we're going to talk about enterprise. We're going to talk about these patterns. What I'm going to title this talk when it goes out is going to be Deconstructing Mental Illness. Because I really feel like when you look at the success that internal family systems has been having over the last 10 or 20 years, particularly they got started with eating disorders. Richard Schwartz was a family therapist in an eating disorders setting. And began seeing that so many of these people with eating disorders had these different personalities. And so I'm looking at the IFS picture. When you talk to guys like Richard Schwartz, he'll tell you everybody is a multiple personality. We're all fragmented to a degree, to a certain amount. So these guys here that are basically integrated, but have little sub-personalities that are happening for them, are multiples. Or if we don't call them multiples, probably the better term to use is plural. So we all have plurality. We all have sub-personalities. It's just that in the general population, you don't see what you see over here with the median systems and the full-blown DID people, where they're not just sub-personalities, they actually separate out and they can be their own entity.
Right.
So at this end of the continuum, they blast apart and they show you, hey, this is all possible. I can be several different people. And then you get out to the Eckhart Tolle guys and non-duality. And, we got into meditation in our 20s really heavily, and we started to sense this stuff, and patients in particular really kind of like walked into it, where this is a continuum. We start out as babies, right? Being everything. We're conditioned and socially programmed to become an individual. And that individual is what's needed by your tribe or your family. We need you to be a certain way with certain patterns, recognizable morals, common sort of arrangements so that we can all interact together. Right? It's a natural process where you become like the tribe that's raising you. Right? That's a standard thing. And when you get into Terence McKenna and psychedelics, the first thing he tells you, one of the biggest tenets of McKenna's is culture is not your friend.
Yeah.
What it does eventually, and we can see this through the continuum of life, is it confines you.
Right.
The older you get,
it defines you, makes you think that that's who you are.
Right. And so it packages you. You go to school, you become a certain way, you enter a career, you do your life.
Right.
You have a family, you raise kids. You're doing all of this stuff in a conformist pattern, which is successful. It has a utility. I'm both anti-conformist and conformist. I look at the conformity picture and I say, yeah, it's good to be able to use common language, common ideals, and get stuff done together. But then the older you get, the more you realize this really is just a play. It's an arranged idea for how we're all going to interact together. So later on, you don't give a shit so much about the culture. If you're getting into psychedelics in your teens and 20s, you're really not giving a shit about the culture. And that's what we have a lot of today. We have a lot of people who are coming up through the system and just not buying it anymore. They're checked out of what the standard reality picture is. And then we have a lot of older people who are still clinging to that and trying to live like, it's the 1950s. When the 60s came along, all of this stuff kind of cracked open. But there are still people who are trying to emulate those kind of 1950s ideas. That kind of pre-expanded consciousness conformity.
Right.
And the conformity is fine. It's a component of holding yourself in a pattern, which is a valuable thing. I don't have a problem with people who are conformists as long as they realize what they're doing. Right?
Okay.
So the conformity picture, you know, it gets blown apart all the time. And you know, so many people like your mom and other people are what we call mentally ill because they can't conform to the pattern. And what they are actually doing is sensing they're indivisible, sensing the openness to everything, sensing that they have all of this variability within them. Parts can come out of them, take over for an afternoon. Everybody looks at these guys and goes, holy shit, these guys are crazy.
Yeah.
Right? And what the conformists, the biggest fear that conformists have is they don't want to stick out. Right? They want to stay in their conformist state so that they fit in with everybody successfully. If they stick out and they look a little crazy sometimes, they hide that. And our little people and middle people are youngsters with single digit ages up to 9, and then our early adolescents, you know, 12 to 15-year-olds, 10 to 10, 11-year-olds, the middles, know we can be all this other stuff. They have a proximity to the babies that are completely open, everything. As we treasure children because they are such open, free spirits, right?
Yeah.
But then we mold them to become conformity
Right.
robots.
Yeah.
Because hey, this is part of the program. You got to do your robot thing for a couple of decades to contribute to society the way we've got it structured.
Right.
So when I look at the experiences I've had that are similar to your mom, where I've totally blown off and cracked off into the ether and become, you know, completely separated from the conformist ideals. And people have looked at me and going, holy fuck, this guy is crazy.
Yeah.
I've looked at it and I've said to myself, well, I wonder what this is. You know, the thing that I have that maybe isn't so common out there, I think it is common, but it's maybe not the standard picture or the standard arrangement that people think about when they think about dissociatives. Is as Ryder, Mark didn't want to keep going at 9, so he stopped. Patience went until 12, and then she said, no, I'm not getting into this adult shit. So then they came together to open up a new altar, which was Ryder. And they've stayed with Ryder, kind of like keeping him on track. Right? And so Ryder is kind of a shell altar. Ryder doesn't have that sort of core presence, that baby awareness that Mark and Patience have. So Mark and Patience have informed Ryder for years, and Ryder has become his own person. But more or less the adult, more or less that's what he was designed for, was to carry on in that conformity, wedge of conformity, and function as that representative. Be out there, represent us in a conformist way as a standard adult, and we'll hang out in the back with all our pain and suffering. So when I say I was curious about this stuff, I was looking at it and going, wow, I was just completely off the reservation for, you know, several days. I could feel it building up over weeks and sometimes months. And I would jam it back down with, you know, antipsychotics or whatever. But I've been totally off all my psych meds. Lithium was the last medication that I was using for psych. Since 2020, I've been on a quarter dose of it. So I've been at a 25% dose therapeutic range of lithium with my 2020 picture. And then just in the last few months, we cut it out completely. And I can tell you, without the psych meds, these guys float a little more in my world. You apply the psych meds, compressing them down further and further so that that conformity picture can stay, right? So the psychiatric meds need to conform. If you have situations where conformity is your thing and you value that, use the psych meds if that's what you're doing. I understand, like a lot of people who are dissociative in their 20s and 30s and 40s, they have families to raise, they have careers to manage. I'm at the end of my career. I've had so many breaks now, and I've gotten so much kind of like being blown apart at this point. For me, I'm looking at, you know, the next 5 to 10 years to sort this stuff out. I'm going to be 60, in my mid 60s by the time I'm really settled with most of this stuff. I'm at retirement age, right? So I'm on disability. I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about the rate of reimbursement for it. I think you know, it's kind of impossible to live on this stuff. I've got the book, and I've got this perception of myself now as I've got a good tracking through the entire continuum of all of this plurality. So I'm playing with this. I'm opening it up to say, hey, why don't we start looking at this a little different? When you're over here with full-blown DID and you are disordered, that is a bad situation for a lot of people, particularly younger and trying to raise a family and trying to run a career. But it is also part of the path to fuller, broader consciousness, the openness that we all are. So while it looks disordered, it's also a waypoint for wider consciousness, for expanded capacity, expanded awareness. Well, it's disordered. Everybody's like, holy shit, this is pretty difficult. But when it does get ordered and smooths out, and you're operating on several channels that are quite opposed to each other sometimes, but you're making it work, that is the kind of consciousness that people over here can't seem to put together. If you're conforming here as a Muslim, the Christians will be like this, right? The Jews will be like this. The Buddhists will be kind of like, you know, more of a basket trying to hold everything together. But that recipe in all of these layers of conformity is a disaster. And I don't have to sell that. I mean, everybody, it's evident, right? We understand that you can get into strict conformity of one kind or another, and you're always going to be at odds with somebody on the opposite side of the spectrum. When you get over into functional multiplicity or cohesive multiplicity, what you're looking at is a bunch of different people in one body managing, be different, understanding the way we can kind of accompany each other or accentuate our differences to open our awareness and become more whole. So I'm presenting dissociation and plurality and multiplicity as a pattern of broader and broader awareness. Whereas the people over here in the conformity camps look at it as a big disaster. Oh, that's no good, you know. I mean, it's broad awareness. We want to stick to conformity.
Well, and that's a problem with and you often refer to kind of the 20th century model of mental health or mental illness, and I mean, and that's one of the things that I've seen with it for a long time is that it's so, you know, you're describing a framework, a way of understanding, you know, mental health and good consciousness and, you know, a bunch of things, but I think of it as it's kind of a perspective or a framework. And, you know, the traditional, you know, 20th century model of mental illness is it's fundamentally concerned with something called mental illness, that there's a problem, there's in it, and so everything is viewed through that. So all the diagnoses are, they're all made up, they're clusters of symptoms, so that already the assumption is they're bad. I mean, if this is, and if you've got enough of these symptoms, then you've got this disorder. But it's a pretty simplistic way of looking at this stuff that I don't think fits very well at all. And in fact, there's no room for spirituality. Spirituality doesn't even exist in mental health. It's just a cultural thing that people can have, and you sort of like, oh yeah, well, sometimes it explains certain symptoms, but anyway, back to your illness, this one or that one. So yeah, I have a lot of my own concerns with DSM diagnoses and using that as a way to actually try to make sense of anything. I've never even done it. I've never actually used it in that way. And most therapists I talk to pretty much say that they use diagnoses to reimburse for insurance, and that's really the primary purpose.
The DSM was designed as a billing tool.
It's great for, great for that. I guess it works for that, but it sucks for anything
companies
else.
are like, what the hell are we paying for?
Right.
You have to classify people into different areas of mental illness.
Right.
Say,
You gotta justify.
This guy's got an anxiety disorder,
Right,
and it's affecting his sleep. He can't work,
Right.
so we're giving him, a dozen sessions at this rate, and then reimbursement happens.
Yeah. It's no way of actually understanding anything.
But it's morphed into, the DSM says this, right?
Yeah.
It's a billing tool.
Yeah.
It is a pattern of how you conduct the business of settling people back into society, back into some kind of picture of conformity.
Back to the conformity thing, absolutely.
And if you're
right. So super high functioning is you go to work, you do all the things that people like Eckhart Tolle and Alan Watts and Terence McKenna would go, oh no, you've just completely bought into the whole system and your own programming, and you're not changing. And a mental health professional steeped in DSM would go, oh yeah, great, he's doing perfect.
He's returned to society. We've put him back on track.
That's right.
And basically there's a Netflix series. I don't know if I've talked to you about this before. I've mentioned a couple of things, turned you on to a few things over the months we've known each other, but there's a Netflix series called Ratchet. And it's about Nurse Ratchet from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah, I watched it. It was good. Yeah, so it's the prequel to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
It's like Batman Begins for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right. Now that's not based on a true story though, right? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
it's very, very well done. And the thing that I was impressed with, I got up to visit my mom in the fall in Canada. We took the motorcycle up north, and hung out with her for like 10 or 12 days. And she's got Netflix, so we're cruising around looking at stuff. I hardly watch TV, so when I'm with somebody who's got a TV, I'm like, okay, let's look at TV. And we got into this Ratchet series. It was just starting, and psychiatry has not changed.
Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
Like when you look at people in the 40s going, oh, you're a lesbian, we have a solution for that. It's called lobotomy. And this is like operating theaters where these psychiatrists come out in their lab coats and they're like, we can cure this woman's lesbianism. Just take a surgical instrument that looks a lot like an ice pick, slip it up under her eyelid, and just rattle it around in that frontal lobe. No more lesbianism.
Just a little brain damage. Fix you right up.
Now what we're doing today is, the lobotomies that you see out there that are still happening often go along with like seizure disorders or some kind of like, really, really unmanageable situations. And then you look at people with head injuries who have like a traumatic lobotomy and are kind of like blown back into a sort of an infantile state. But what we're doing today for lobotomies is two things. Chemicals. We're chemically lobotomizing ourselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of the pharmaceutical industry, but I do recognize that if you're in a conformity situation and all of a sudden this is popping up and you're too crazy, and they say, okay, let's put you on these drugs and get you back down to sort of functioning for a while. I'm in agreement with that. I'm okay with that, especially since it's not a permanent lobotomy. It's a chemical state of lobotomization where we can kind of return you to your pattern, get you functioning again. But then, holy shit, after a few months or a year or two max, get you off of that shit. Try to figure out how you can conform, but what's happening in these explosions of consciousness. Your ability to function on medications is, and I can state this because I've lived it, is roughly 20 or 30% of the living that you normally do. People who say, oh, you know, I'm on this new medication and it's great. I'm sure it's great for a while. Talk to them in a year or two and they'll say, oh yeah, you know, it was working great. I was really good with it for the first year or 6 months. But then there's these side effects and this wasn't working and blah, blah, blah. So now I'm on this. So it's like that treadmill picture that you and I talked about on the last session, where you get on a new thing and, oh, this is great, this is going to work. So you're promoting that because you're so attached to that conformity that you just want to get back to that conformity. If I can take a medication and get back to my conformity picture, that's what I need. That's what these little people want. These little people that are kind of like hiding out and saying, oh, our representative's in trouble. We've been a little bit too juicy and popped out here and popped out there. And now they're coming at us with the pharmaceuticals. Let's quiet down for a while so they can get back into their conformity picture. The host, our representative needs to be a shiny, happy person conforming with the tribe. That's the whole purpose of what we've been doing. We've been holding all of this trauma back. We've been packaging ourselves to stay hidden so you can step out and be part of the tribe. And the tribe's requirements are that you conform in this way, this way, this way, this way. And we've all kind of understood that as children growing up. We've clamped ourselves down in order to allow you to meet the next level of conformity. Clamped ourselves down so you can meet the next level of conformity. Clamped ourselves down so you can meet the next level of conformity. And now you're an adult functioning in society. Isn't that what everybody wants? So this childhood picture of yourself saying, I can't be a child anymore. I need to move to a new level. I need to grow. We're kind of like backwards on our thinking a lot of the time with this block of conformity, because you never get everybody conforming to the same thing. It's always competing conformities, right? Like I mentioned the religious picture with Muslims, Jews, and Christians, just for an example. But then you have all these other levels of conformity, whether you want to get into genders, the masculine, the feminine war that's been going on, it seems like forever. What I've discovered is the masculine and the feminine in myself complement each other beautifully. Like, I'm so much more at ease with where I'm at in my masculine and feminine, but I don't subscribe to those conformist patterns of what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. I'm not fitting that 1950s model. And so many of us aren't, right? That's pretty much over. What I see a lot of people, we all tend to do this, and I do this as well, believe me. There's certain parts of me that are like, hey, we aren't conforming, right? And I was programmed, not necessarily by my parents, but yes, by my parents in one respect. But I was fractured with this attachment. I was so badly injured from my attachment injuries at birth and the medical trauma that I desperately wanted to belong. And what I tell people today is I still desperately want to belong. I still desperately need people.
Yeah.
But that understanding doesn't come from these early maneuvers I did to conform. It comes from my awareness that I'm everything. So there's a balance in, yeah, we all need each other. We're all one being. We got to figure this stuff out. We're getting tied up in all of these conformist, you know, contradictory, warring factions.
Yeah.
And over here, you're seeing people with non-conformity. And I tell people all the time, I'm a variability enthusiast. With all this non-conformity, and they're making it work. And then you get out there into the sort of expanded, broader consciousness of things, the non-duality, and it's like, hold it a second, we're everything. So these levels of dissociation are just stepping stones to your ultimate everythingness. So you get it. You know, I won't mention names, but there's a couple of people I hang out with online and I've met in person that have over 100 personalities. And I look at them and I'm like, holy fuck, how do you manage that? But what I also get from them is this sort of calm sort of presence, right? This like powerful sort of like, I'm multidimensional. They have it. There's a very small percentage of people like that, or if they get like that, they don't necessarily trend with it to say, hey, this is the way that we can become everything. So now you've got me in the last couple of years coming up with my multiplicity and going, I've been writing a book about non-duality for 8 years. I've been out here in the ether with all these bizarre ideas. And the 3 books that I've written that are about to come out this year are geared to me looking at myself as bipolar, but writing as a multiple, thinking I'm a chameleon personality, I'm out on my motorcycle alone, it's the summer of 2012, it's the end of the world, I'm getting divorced, I'm losing my mind, right? Like it's just, this is not a good event for me. So what I had was about 1.5 to 2 years of a sustained hypomanic state where I wasn't attached to reality anymore, but I was writing. That was patience who was coming out and saying, hey, think about this stuff over here. The more we can get into this openness, this broader awareness, this non-duality, the more this other shit smooths out. Because we're done conforming. We've tried to conform, we've tried to conform, and it's so that's what my books are about, and I've gone back and edited them several times. I've looked at, you know, cleaning them up in certain ways, telling the story a little better. And for a while there, about a year ago, I was like, well, I wrote these as a singlet, thinking he was a chameleon personality, and had a knack for writing as a multiple. But what really was going on was Patience was writing 70% of the book as a multiple, just with the broader awareness of non-duality. So when I look at this pattern, I think to myself, you know, now that I know I'm a multiple, should I be throwing that into the book? Should I be? And I'm like, no, I got to keep it that stretch of 2012 to 2016 where I wrote most of it. I'm keeping it with my awareness as a singlet, coming out, manifesting the bipolar, working with the bipolar, seeing that there's a continuum between being manic and being depressed, or if we turn the continuum this way, depression, mania. So I've left it all pretty much the way it was written. The next couple of books I write will be more along the lines of, yeah, this is the multiplicity picture, this is how it all fits in. I'm covering a lot of that here. Like I'm giving away a lot of this broader perspective. But when we look at the nuts and bolts of what mental illness is, or supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
it's a picture where you're not conforming anymore.
Right. Right.
The nonconformity is a problem for the people who want you to conform.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But what we're finding out as we become more evolved and more broadly aware is the people that are conforming in this way against the people that are conforming in this way against the people that are conforming in this way.
Right.
A huge fucking problem.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's a disaster. That's going to end us as a species.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's weaponized to the teeth.
Yeah.
I don't know how many countries out there have nuclear weapons and how many other countries have them, but we don't know about them.
Uh-huh.
And even all of that picture of what the 20th century great big menace was of nuclear proliferation,
Mm-hmm.
that's even gone by the wayside now, because what we have in the 21st century is disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And biological. If you want to call COVID a weaponized virus,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not it was designed that way, whether or not it was rolled out that way,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it has become.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so politicized now, nobody can decide what to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's just another instrument of warfare.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we're eating ourselves alive.
Yep.
With different pictures of how to manage a disease.
Yeah.
We don't need nuclear weapons anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We can
not going to help. Not going to help with this one.
Set ourselves completely up with our biology, with all of this stuff. I'm not going to get into COVID much, but I'll tell you that in my pattern of everythingness, I have patients who's more of a libertarian and is like, let's go with terrain theory, natural immunity, forget the vaccination. And then we've got Mark, who's more of a conformist, collectivist, looks at the picture of, well, maybe these immunizations are a good idea. But we're sitting there floating this. We're not immunized. We're not getting immunized. If something changes drastically and we do become immunized at some point, it's going to be after as long a period of not being immunized as possible. Because I'm not convinced that we know much about mRNA vaccines. I'm not convinced we understand what the implications of this stuff are long term. So the more time we give it, the more we can see what's happening. But my guess is, as writer, is the people that think all of this vaccine stuff is the answer are in for a rude awakening. Because guys like Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, there's this new guy that I've really gotten dialed into lately, Christopher Duncan. They're talking about things from the standpoint of epigenetics. They're talking about the field and what this quantum awareness brings into the individual. The individual turns on certain genes or turns off other genes, opens themselves in different ways. They can become a creative force. In other words, and I tell this to people once in a while, and it only sinks in about this far. You, Brett, and myself, writer, and everybody else is God. But we're pretending to be something else. We're pretending to be conformed to, certain religious ideas this way, or this way, or this way.
Yep.
For everything.
Yep.
And so when I use my 13 words, these are the 13 words I came up with 30 years ago, and they've just like trucked all the way through decades and decades of contemplation and different torques and twists that I've had to deal with in my life. And I keep coming back to it, and it's the nourishment that's kept me going. It's kept me alive. If it was up to my conformist littles that want to hide, I would have suicided several hundred times over the last few decades because they consider stepping out of conformity as a certain kind of death. They've been programmed to think that, no, we have to conform, no, we have to conform. Oh,
Right.
we're not conforming, we're not conforming.
Right.
We should just kill ourselves. But Patience and Ridicu and Lulu, the happy baby, have this openness to everything. And that's kept us alive. So when you were talking a little while ago about how the mental health system doesn't recognize spirituality, you know, you might as well take the mental health system and just kind of like,
yeah.
as far as I'm concerned. Now, the thing to remember here is this is the 21st century. We are going to have a whole new bunch of ideas, and things are going to open up. And at the end of this century, we're going to look back at the beginning of the century and go, holy shit, were those people out to lunch? It's going to be similar to what we had in the 20th century, when we started that century with most people in the world saying, oh, you'll never fly. We're not a bird. Now, you know, we have breakfast in North America and supper in Europe, and we don't even think twice about it.
Right.
So that state of transition is there for us. It's ahead of us. Nobody's really looking at, well, what does that mean? And the tech boys are all like, oh yeah, we're going to have chips inserted in our head, and we're going to be, you know, full of AI and all of this great stuff. And I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with us being in a machine state. When I get into the book, and I won't give this away, but when I talk about it, we actually talk to our motorcycle. So our motorcycle is the machine in that story. And we teach the motorcycle about non-duality. And then the motorcycle, being a machine and being very well ordered, non-duality several steps further and says, well, yeah, of course, we're doing this and we're doing this because this and this and this. So after a while, it's not really clear. Is it where's the information best basketed? Is it in machines, or is it in you know, natural beings, in organic beings? I don't think there's a difference. There's a density that machines have that we're overcoming, and you know, it's a new age. People are like down on new agers because, you know, they're more like conformists. So this new age shit, oh, that's garbage. There are people who are very tender with that organic, looking at ourselves as natural beings, as all we need to be. Really, really emphasizing the masculine, the feminine nature, all of this stuff. And they're telling us, oh no, don't get into that machine stuff. That's all bad. It's all the same stuff. It's all consciousness. When you get into non-duality and you say, I'm everything, you are everything.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can't say, well, I'm everything, but I'm not this stuff.
Right.
And that awareness, that way I've tracked with things, has kept me alive. That outer awareness, that broader sense of myself, has ameliorated all the problems I've had conforming all my life. So this is a guidepost or a waypoint to everythingness. And this is a breakdown. The breakdown is important. It's important to have these confinements. It's important to have these constructs of conformity so that we can see that they don't work. That's the main purpose of this stuff. So when we look at the last couple of thousand years of what's been going on, and, you know, like how we're recording history and what we're gaining from it, what we've done is we've constructed what I call the Antichrist. we figured out what doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Antichrist isn't someone who's showing up and saying, hey, I'm the badass.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
The Antichrist is what we've been doing since Christ was nailed to a fucking cross.
Mm.
That started right away.
Mm.
People say, oh, it's coming in 2,000 years. It's not coming in 2,000 years. It's going to take 2,000 years for us to realize what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now open to that Christ consciousness. There's nothing wrong with the Antichrist. There's nothing wrong with conformity. There's nothing wrong with confinement. We confine as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why I say in my 13 words, in the sort of leanest dogma around, I am, like everyone, an individual, indivisible presentation of that which is whole.
Mm.
You are attached to a tribe and a family. You do have individual functions
Mm-hmm.
to conform and confine yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of your picture. You're also everything.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
duality of that freaks the shit out of people.
Right.
So they don't want to look at this.
Yeah.
I got to stay confined in my tribe, and I got to produce and perform in a set fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Even though my set fashion is 180 degrees apart from this guy's set fashion, and we just want to fucking kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is the up to the 20th century awareness.
Mm-hmm.
21st century awareness that we're everything is coming.
Mm.
And when I get into the more specific picture, we'll talk a little bit now. We should probably cover a bit of this enterprise rent-a-car fiasco. One thing that the book does very well is inserts a lot of humor. It's kind of like a, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance meets Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy meets Bugs Bunny. So we don't take too much of this stuff seriously.
Mm-hmm.
The humor we use in it expands it and makes it more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've done as our multiplicity has started to open and open and open in the last year or two is looked at, hey, what are we doing? How is this going to work? And what our littles keep telling us is they want to do comedy. They want to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make this stuff fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's a return to our childhood in a way, right? Because we were always the joker, always trying to like lighten the situation up. Humor as a pop-off valve takes down the pressure of most situations.
Mm.
And to tell you the truth, we've had mostly a couple of thousand years of tragedy. This is more about comedy. This is more about opening to broader things, more open, organic truths that bring us that laughter, that bring us that joy.
Mm-hmm.
So we got into, at the beginning of 2020, before COVID hit, a buddy of mine, Mike Pardo, and I started a improv group called Incidents of Improv.
Mm-hmm.
And we were starting to get it set up. We were, booking different places to practice, to get kind of like people together to see who wanted to be in a troupe. And within about a month or two, COVID hit, and that all got shut down. So for the spring and summer, our improv group was dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then here in Florida, by the time the fall rolled around and certain bars started to have live comedy again, social distancing, people seated at every second table, comic goes up on stage with a mask, takes the mask off, talks into the mic for 5-10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The host comes up with a sani towel, wipes down the mic for the next comic. It's been happening.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at it and going, well, there's still so many people that we know who do improv are holed up at home and they're not coming up. But the stand-up guys, the younger stand-up comedy crowd is out there getting back into it. And you've been through this as well. You did the whole laying everything off for the spring and summer of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So we got our Incidents of Improv group back up and running. We did lay in with a couple of really seasoned people who are like, you know, running workshops for us. We're trying to bring people back out to do improv workshops, masked. We've got these clear visor face shields. Doing improv over Zoom doesn't work. There's a gap. You don't have the energy in the room.
Yeah.
There's a time delay when you put more than 3 or 4 people on the screen, so that one
Yeah.
person comes in and then there's a break and then another person comes in.
Yeah.
It's just too clunky.
Yeah.
So the 8 or 10 or 12 times I sat in on Zoom sessions doing improv, I was just like, okay, this is murdering the art form.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's over.
Yeah.
Right? So we got back out there starting to do physical comedy, physical stand-up. Live stuff works. And we started to bring back the idea of improv, bringing people together on outdoor events. You know, it's December, January, February in Florida. 70 degrees is the average temperature in the evening. Very little rainfall. Let's do this shit outdoors. And it's working. We're getting people out and we're putting this stuff together. One of the ideas we had, and this is Mark and Patience who are primarily running the show as far as our comedy goes. They want to get everybody in minivans, hitting different events, doing street comedy, doing kind of like, you know, flash mob stuff. And we were talking to a couple of our colleagues, a couple of our guys, saying, hey, what if we all had Chrysler Pacificas or Chrysler Voyager minivans, and we were all kind of like traveling around in a pack like biker gangs? And the minivans would have 3 or 4 improvisers that were also stand-up comedians who could just drop into whatever scenario outdoors anywhere and do a gig. This whole idea was bubbling for like a month. And then on Christmas morning, we hardly dreamed. We shut our dreams down when we were 13 years old. Just too many nightmares, too much bullshit. We woke up in a cold sweat one day and just said, that's it. I'm not remembering any more dreams. And so from then on, I've probably only remembered a couple of dozen small dream fragments that you just have as you're waking up. And then as soon as you're awake and you're sitting down to your first cup of coffee, I can't remember what I was dreaming about. It's almost rare for me now to have any real recollection of dreams, because I just took my mental state and said, enough with the nightmares. I'm done with that shit. What I do, and this is part of the meditation process that I came to in my 20s, is I lucid dream. And I wasn't really aware that I lucid dreamed. If you talk to people who are into lucid dreaming and astral travel or astral projection, there's a bunch of stuff out there that people are like, oh yeah, you got to get into this stuff. It's really cool. And I've been doing it my whole life. I just didn't know I was doing it. So what I'm doing now more is being conscious of my littles coming out, taking us on a voyage that is more intuitive, less intellect based, and opening us to a bunch of different ideas. So what happened on Christmas morning, I've been doing the Santa bit for like all through the Christmas holidays. I got the big beard. I'm telling everybody, you know, we're son of Santa. It's a great bit. We're expanding it. We're having fun with it. Christmas morning, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I think it was a lucid dream, but it was a more vivid, richer lucid dream. Where we're riding along the lakeshore in our old hometown on our 10-speed bicycle at, like, you know, the wee hours of the morning. And as the sun rising, there's this midget on a magic carpet cruising along the shoreline. And he's flanked by a couple of Canada geese. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever, right? It's kind of funny. Like, let's go there. Let's have a little fun with this. But then we cross this area where there's a creek, The midget comes off the shoreline and T-bones us right into the side of our bicycle. One of the geese gets its neck broken in the spokes. You know, we're sideways on the sidewalk, kind of just laying there, kind of like baffed out. The midget gets up, pounds us a couple times, and then takes off. And I'm looking at all of this and I'm like, it's almost like I just entered a David Lynch film where I'm sitting there going, okay, there's something happening here. This is a vivid, directed sort of event. I don't know what it means, but you know, you're in a dream state. A couple hours go by. My littles have gotten us up, gone into our cupboard. My old friend who used to have this apartment had a bunch of hobby paints that were interior latex, different color paints. And we were doing different things together, and we'd get together with other friends and do some painting sometimes. So I'm sitting there pulling this stuff out of my cupboard, looking at all of these different paints. I grab a spatula from a kitchen drawer, and we march out to the parking area here, where we have a rental car. It's a Chrysler Voyager minivan from Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Mark, who is 9 years old, but he flexes down. He regresses into being more of a little at times. Starts the car up, takes it across the street where there's an open grassy area. We shake up the paints, crack the tops off them, get the spatula out, and Jackson Pollock the right side of this minivan with all these different house paints. And I'm looking at this as Ryder. I'm in the back seat now. I'm not really functioning in this scenario. I'm looking at it and going, oh, okay. Wow. Right? But the littles have just taken over. They're just like, this is how we're going to do it. We're transforming our Enterprise minivan into a work of art. We're doing this art form stuff. We're doing improv, right?
Yeah.
And to me, looking at it, when I had a chance to look at it later, I've got Mark and Patience talking about these minivans. We're all gonna cruise around in minivans, and we're gonna get Enterprise Rent-A-Car to sponsor us. We're gonna do this stuff where, you know, comedians come to town, they get a minivan, and you know, they're joining us on these outings. But now the littles have said, we want to play too. And they don't really think in terms of, well, okay, this is acceptable, socially acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
They're the guys who look at the conformity and go, hey, let's do this. So they pop out, they paint this minivan. At the end of the paint job, after about an hour, we've splattered it with all these different colors of house paint. Patience is aware enough to see what's going on at this point, and she puts the final color, which was blue, into a pattern that says free on the side. And we're thinking, okay, this is the free Enterprise, you know, like Star Trek Enterprise going off and exploring new worlds. We're doing a free Enterprise minivan we're gonna terraform Earth with comedy, right? So the idea is, Patience explains it. She says, yeah, this is what we're doing now. And I'm kind of buying it as Ryder. I'm like, okay, I guess you guys are really taking off with this improv idea. The comedy's really popping. We're getting this, we're promoting this now. So this is a promotion vehicle. You know, we're probably going to get in trouble. But at that point, I'm thinking, hey, this is what these guys want. This is what this is how their vision. So I go with it. But what I realized later is Patience wasn't really on board with this. Mark is the guy who flexes down into being a little. Patience is a middle at 12 who flexes up into being an adult. So when she kind of came around and sort of looked at what we were doing, she took it over to be, okay, this is what we are intending to do. Mark and the littles are just fucking blasting it out, going, woohoo, we're having fun with this stuff. The rest of us don't see it. We're like, what the fuck are we doing painting a rental car? Patient steps in and goes, it's okay. This is part of the promotion. We're a comedy troupe.
Right.
We're doing a custom paint job to a rental car. It's funny. We drove the thing for another week. We took it to an enterprise rental agency right across from ArtServe in Fort Lauderdale. That wasn't the rental car agency that rented us the car. And we said, hey, you know, we're doing this new improv group and we've painted one of your cars and we want to talk to your business manager about doing promotions. So the guys there are looking at us going, holy shit. And then they're like, what, is this our rental car? No, we rented it from a different location. So then they're like, oh, good. Okay. We don't
Yeah.
But we sat there and we filmed it all. And what I learned from that was this was kind of one of those big events where we just popped out of our conformity. The littles just blasted off. They just, well, let's go do something crazy.
Yeah.
To them, it's fun.
Yeah.
Right. To them, it's like, this is really cool. We're going to be expansive. We're going to go more to that openness, awareness side, the non-confinement. We've been dealing with this confinement. But every once in a while, we'd like to fucking blow off a little steam and do some crazy shit. So they're all into this. This is now an art form. We're doing this thing with, you know, they didn't really consciously say we're doing this thing with enterprise, but they were like, just making an art form. Right? So Patience recognizes what's going on. Her instinct immediately is to give it a backstory. Like, okay, this is part of our plan. This is what we were doing all along.
Right. Yeah.
And the impulse or the reflex for her to go and do that, to cover for the littles, I recognized the pattern there immediately. It took me a couple of weeks, but I recognized that this is what she's done her whole life. Littles pop out of the conformity picture, do something crazy, and then she comes along to say, oh yeah, but you know, we've been thinking about this, and we, you know, so you're sitting there talking to a psychologist or a psychiatrist in a emergency room lockdown or in a psych ward, and they're like, so you did this, you know, in the 2001 range, we were designing a rapid transit system for the city of Seattle, and we wound up at the border of Canada and the US, a place called Peace Arch Park between Blaine, Washington and White Rock, British Columbia, in our underwear dancing, because we had figured out how to do this rapid transit system. And we're telling the psychiatrist this, and like, oh yeah, you're bipolar. No discussion of, you know, early childhood trauma or anything.
Yeah.
Any of that. So we're going to put you on these medications and we're going to tamp all of this down. We're going to put you back into your conformity box.
Yeah.
And so that story in our head, well, we've got this wild idea for a rapid transit system. And that's why we were kind of like so exuberant and excited and stripped down to our underwear and was dancing. You know, this is after like 5 days of no sleep and all the sort of standard ratcheting up pictures of psychosis, right? So Patience brings in this rapid transit. We're moving we're taking our society in a better direction idea to give us that grandiosity, to make it look like, well, yeah, I'm an adult in a confined pattern, and every once in a while I get grandiose and I have this weird idea and I do something, I fuck it up. I might have a great idea that's very creative and has some merit. Then I come out and I just blow it wide open with all this crazy shit. And people are like, oh yeah, this guy's crazy. When Patient covers that up with the backstory, it fits very nicely with grandiosity. It fits beautifully with a bipolar picture. And I'm buying it. I'm like, okay, you're putting me on these medications, and yeah, I'm ratcheting back down into my conformity picture. I'm in my 30s. I'm an RN. I have a mortgage, I have a wife, I have to get back into my conformity picture.
Yeah.
Straightforward.
Yeah.
But what she's really doing in agreeing to that, in giving us that backstory, is she's covering the fact that it was the littles
Right.
that just got sort of tracking with all of this newness and funness and openness, this broader awareness, and said, woohoo, let's do this.
Right.
So you don't, in your mind, look at this and say, I'm a multiple. I've got these littles, these primal little freaks that just do this crazy shit from time to time. And that's how I get into these messes. She covers enough backstory, enough intellectual information to let you think, oh, you just were like ratcheting up your mania, you had these ideas, it got to be flight of ideas, and then poof, you popped with this great big manic episode. So now that's where you live. You live in that range of mania, mental illness, nonconformity, grandiosity. Hello, I'm bipolar. But what really cracked it off, what really blew the lid off of everything and just turned everything to shit and made everything go sideways, was the littles with their expansive, open-ended views of things, where they know anything's possible, and they just want to play. They're just like, okay, hey, we're doing a rapid transit system for Seattle. Great.
Sure.
Let's cap it off with, like, you know, doing a big dance at the border crossing between Canada and the US. And we'll, you know, eventually we'll have the trains running, you know, you'll be able to leave downtown Vancouver and be in downtown Seattle in 20 minutes. You know, like for them, it's like, yeah, this totally makes sense. We're having fun. We're doing this crazy shit.
Right.
Patience doesn't want you to know that the littles have just exploded with all of this crazy shit. She wants you to think this was your idea all along. It just got away from you. So she's hiding your multiplicity, letting you believe you're bipolar. If you ask these guys who are hiding behind you, and you can talk to, you know, in the next 10 years, a few hundred or even 1,000 clients that seem to fit the multiplicity picture, and you find out what's going on with those guys back here hiding, I bet you like 80 or 90% of the time, they're like, oh no, it's much better to have a bipolar diagnosis than for people to know about us. Right?
Yeah.
It's 10 times better to be medicated and back into the conformity wedge, because we have a wife, we have a mortgage, we have a career. And it's important to our host, our representative, to conform to the tribe. So we're going to stay hidden.
Yeah.
But if you come up with that hypomania again, and we're doing something crazy for a while, and a month's going by, and we've got all of these wild ideas, we might just pop again, and we go into the situation and just kind of really go for it.
Right.
But then when we draw back and hide because we realize, oh shit, you know, we went a little too far. Right? These people are primal littles. They're like toddlers. If you look at toddlers raging or tantruming, or just going, like, you know, on a sugar buzz and just becoming maniacs, that's what's happening. So they come out, they're maniacs, and then they're like, oh shit, people can see us. Then they hide. Then your middles come along and go, oh no, yeah, that was just you getting kind of like expansive and grandiose. You had a lot of you know, flight of ideas going there, and these bipolar medications will put us back into that zone, that confinement we need to be back into.
Right.
Beautiful cover up. Right? I don't mind telling you, I bought it. I was totally there with it until this past Enterprise Rent-A-Car, where I did all this crazy shit. We were out on US 1 in the middle of traffic in a left turn lane, between ArtServe and the Enterprise Rent-A-Car and a place next door to Enterprise called The Collection, where they sell all these Mercedes and Rolls Royce and Porsches, all these kind of exotic cars. And the car was painted, and we had our street hockey gear. Part of our game plan was to go out and play street hockey. Show up to that holiday park there that's right by ArtServe, and play street hockey with different people and film it and have some fun. And we did that. And it was part of our promotions for the comedy stuff. Outdoor comedy, having fun. Well, we painted the car Christmas morning. Christmas afternoon, we're on US 1 in the left turn lane, parked the car sideways, brought our motorcycle from across the street in and put it up. And we're playing street hockey with ourselves. We've set up a net, but we figure we got the sign that says free street hockey clinic. It's Christmas Day. We should be able to get some people to, pull over and come out and play a little street hockey with us. Of course, the cops show up, and they're like, this isn't happening. By the way, the Fort Lauderdale police still owe us a street hockey scrimmage. They said they'd come out. If we took it off the road and went into a parking lot, they'd come by and play a little street hockey with us, and they just blew us off, which was sad. But all of this wildness, right? This whole paint the minivan, take it out into US 1 and play street hockey. Promote this thing, just blow it wide open, go crazy with it. Normally, 9 times out of 10, that's a psychiatric lockdown. That's the next couple of weeks of your life is you're going to be hammered in, locked down nicely with a bunch of antipsychotics. You'll be glued into your socks. Right. And what you think of as you're sort of like sitting there zoned out is, okay, that flight of ideas kind of got away on me. So this stuff is putting me back into my confinement.
Right.
Okay. So I need to be on these medications. But instead of that happening this time, we didn't wind up in psychiatric lockdown. We managed to self-correct. We managed to look at it and say, okay, this is a promotion. We're legitimately doing this now as a promotion. I still haven't paid Enterprise Rent-A-Car. They want $4,200 from me. They put me in the collections now. You've wrote them a letter. My psychiatrist, Dr. Khan, has wrote them a letter to explain my dissociative stuff. They're not having it. They're like, we know you were fucking around, painted that rent-a-car, rubbed our noses in it by taking it to a different enterprise and talking to them about doing all this comedy stuff. Oh, you're a bad apple. And we don't have any argument for them except working through this all in our head, saying, how the fuck did we do another one of these crazy things where we had a good idea going, we had a great plan, and it just blew out, it exploded again, it got away from us. How did that happen? I thought we were realizing that we're not bipolar, that we're multiple, and we're having some fun with the multiplicity now. We're joking around about it in our comedy. We're building an improv organization to take more improv out into the street. This is all doable stuff. I've got people around me helping me with this. We're making it happen. How did we fucking wind up taking the minivan, painting it, and then parking it in the middle of US 1 later that day to play street hockey and try to get the cops to play street hockey with us? Right? Normally that's a psychiatric lockdown. Here's your antipsychotics for the next couple of weeks. You're going to be zoned out. But because we didn't get to that stage where we were able to self-correct, got ourselves back out of it, looked at it and said, okay, what's really going on here? We're multiples, but we're still doing this crazy bipolar shit where we just go right off the rails. And then we looked at it and we realized it wasn't until the end of the paint job when patients put free across the car that she was owning it. He was taking responsibility for it and saying, yes, this is part of our promotions. This is the way we're going to advance incidents of improv to put us on the map. It's wild, it's crazy, it's edgy. Maybe later we'll go out and play some street hockey like we had planned to. We'd bought all the gear, but we were going to go in a holiday park and play street hockey with a couple of the, people in the park. No, we're parking it in the middle of US 1. So the whole picture for this is these guys will do anything to not come out and and show themselves. They'll hide. They'll let you believe you're bipolar. They'll let you believe you have flight of ideas, because that's a story that works for getting you back into your conformity. But now that I'm over here and it's like, no, this is multiplicity, I can see the contrast. I can see, okay, this is what mental illness is. If you look at internal family systems telling you everybody, even the people who are successful at conforming, have subpersonalities that are at odds within themselves, creating disease, like anxiety, like depression, like bipolar. Once you take these people and you make them look at themselves in parts, not full-blown dissociatives who have separate alters, but just integrated people that still have parts, still have subpersonalities that are integrated, but at odds with each other, you can take care of depression, you can take care of anxiety, you can take care of bipolar. To a large degree, this multiplicity picture, this opening yourself to your plurality, solves your problems using internal family systems. When I figured this out in the last year, and I'm looking at this book that Patience has been writing about all of this open awareness and oneness, and IFS, which is not pathologizing, which means it doesn't treat you as sick, it just treats you as fragmented, and you need to work your fragmentation out a little further. It takes you into your self energy, your sort of true essence. You're not completing ego states. You're not completing subpersonalities anymore. You're opening to yourself. They relax. That gives yourself, your true nature, a chance to float. And now, boom, you're smooth. This is demonstrated. This is evidence-based science. These guys have been doing it legitimately for like 20 years. That's out there for everybody. What happens with me is I come along, I'm in the middle. I have a nursing background. I have a picture of IFS that really got me sort of opening to my multiplicity early on. When nothing else was working, right? Medications up the wazoo for the first year after my motorcycle accident. I was trying every different antipsychotic out there. I was on different sleep medications, doubling up on different doses of different things, just turning myself into a swamp. And that became a real dead end. I got off the medications eventually because I saw, hey, I can medicate this all day long and it doesn't change a thing. I'm still getting 3 hours of sleep a night. I can hammer myself with like a dose of Seroquel that would make me sleep for 14 or 16 hours. 3 hours of sleep at night. Something else is going on. The medications aren't doing it. Now I see the multiplicity. It's clear to me that if you treat yourself with your plurality, if you examine your fragmentation, if you look at your childhood wounding, or even if you don't consider it wounding, just your sort of confinement, your hard structure, your hard pressing, whatever it was that your family or society wanted from you, pressing you into these confinements, stuff set you up with a fragmented system. You had to keep pushing down your natural, exuberant, childlike parts to step up into the next level of function. Now you're even more valuable in the tribe because of this. And now value on the tribe because you're doing this. But all the while you're doing that, you're pushing down
Yeah.
the natural childlike elements.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting stuff. Yeah, you've got, I mean, like I said, I see it as a framework, it's a perspective, it's a way of making sense of all kinds of things. And you certainly, you certainly have a handle on it. And it's pretty remarkable, that this last experience, and like you said, in the past, it would have resulted in hospitalization and all of that. And definitely didn't this time. So that in and of itself is very interesting.
I did in November, December, get together on a Zoom call with my PID peer support worker, Jade Miller, my psychiatrist, Dr. Stephen Kahn, my transpersonal psychologist, Dr. Catherine Coder. Got them all on a Zoom call and said, listen, we're doing comedy. It's getting kind of wild. We're doing some crazy stuff. Things are going to look a little juicy here for a while.
Yeah.
But we're going for it. I'm letting the middles out.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of crazy ideas. We're going to be, outdoor restaurants, patio areas with a car.
Yeah.
Out and doing comedy for the crowd at the restaurant. Free promotions of our stuff. We might get into a little trouble. We might find, the cops are on us at some point. All of this stuff we saw coming.
You did,
we didn't see it coming to the level of holy.
Right. Yep.
And we're shutting down traffic on US 1.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Get excited with the opportunity to say, hey, you guys are having fun.
Yeah.
It's funner.
Right.
Just do some really wild shit.
Yeah.
It's like a toddler on a sugar high.
Yeah.
Let's
Yep.
climb the curtains and hang out on the curtain rod and whatever.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Mark. Well, hey, it has gone by here. So very, very good to talk with you. Always very interesting. And we'll certainly be talking more, but I'll let you wrap things up however you're going to do it here. But I got to go on to my next next thing. So
we did a 2-hour block for this because I had a feeling the last time in that hour we had.
Yeah.
It was rapid.
Yeah.
Probably this time, but at least I think there was a flow to it all, more of a clear understanding. Having as an anchor to sort of keep me on track and mirror stuff.
Yeah. My pleasure. And definitely covered a lot of ground. So, all right. Until next time.
Mindfulness stuff, man. That's the cool thing. All right, sir.
All right. Take care.
Man, take it easy.
Bye-bye.
So that's Brett, my mindfulness coach. Just a guy that's not buying all the standard confinement stuff, using all of this open-ended mindfulness, using all of this broader awareness to say, hey, this is what you are. You're just struggling with the confinement of whatever your culture, you're overthinking and struggling against these confinements. When really, if you can just let that shit go and look at yourself as a more open spiritual being, you'll learn to not fight this stuff so much. You can sort of do it as an easier thing. So I'll wrap it up here. We're coming up on 2 hours, and I'm learning, right? Like I'm sitting there with everything that I've had going in the past couple of years since the motorcycle accident. Cracked open my multiplicity, made me look at this stuff in sort of totally non-standard ways. When you start to really factor in, hold it a second, I'm not just one entity, I'm several entities. And hey, over here, one of those entities, patience, has been writing about how we're everything, right? We have a book about non-duality, open road experience, fun, comedic stuff. This all sort of flows together. This all fits. The old confinements, they're there, they're necessary, they have a function, but that's just part of your picture. That's your individual working in a confined state. This is your indivisible, open to everything. And you can make all of this work after a while, after opening yourself up to what you are. Again, I'll finish with this. I am, like everyone, an individual, indivisible presentation of that which is whole. We're everything, guys. Love y'all. Talk to you later.